Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world tuning in today. This is a special edition of The Breakthrough Show. Normally, on this program, we explore personal journeys and the moments that shape our lives. But as you saw beginning last summer, occasionally there are moments happening in real time that directly affect families, communities, and the freedoms people experience in their everyday lives. And when those moments arise, it's important to pause and have thoughtful conversations about them. On a personal note, it is really meaningful to me that here on the network, we have a global audience. We have people that tune in from Ireland and England and Australia and New Zealand and Japan and China and amazing places all around the world, not just here in the United States, and then in here in the United States, all around this country. And so the interesting thing about this conversation that we're going to have today about the current homeschooling legislation that's coming down in the state of Connecticut is this is not the only place that we are seeing this happening. So even if you are outside of the United States, even if you are outside of the state of Connecticut, this is an important conversation for everyone to be having, because I feel like no matter where in the world you are, it is our civic duty to have these types of conversations and to help out where we can. So here in Connecticut, two pieces of legislation, SB6 and HB5468, have recently generated significant public attention and concern, particularly within the homeschooling community and among families who are trying to understand how these proposals could impact their lives. For many parents, education is one of the most personal decisions they will ever make for their children. And when legislation is introduced that could change how those decisions are made or overseen, it raises important questions about policy, responsibility, parental rights, and the role of government in family life. Today's conversation is about understanding those questions. My goal for this discussion is simple: to provide clarity, context, and a space for respectful dialogue so people can better understand what these proposals are, what they could mean, and how citizens can thoughtfully engage in the legislative process. To help guide us through this conversation today, I'm joined by two guests who bring important perspectives to this issue. Diane Connors is the president of the Connecticut Homeschool Network, who has worked closely with families across the state and has been deeply involved in conversations surrounding homeschooling policy for years. A long time, you guys. We're so thankful for her service to this state. And Representative Ann Dauphinais, who serves the 44th District here in Connecticut and has been an advocate for parental freedom and family choice within this state. So without further ado, let's bring them on and start our conversation. Good afternoon, ladies. So excited that you could join us here today to have this conversation. I've seen a lot of you both lately.
Thanks for having us, and let's do it.
Let's do it. So what I would like to do first today is give viewers who are hearing about these bills for the first time, in simple terms, what SB6 and what HB5468 are proposing. Because the very interesting thing to me is I have had messages yesterday and today. Now we're one day out from the public hearing of HB5468, and they're saying to me, I had no idea. So for those tuning in who maybe have not heard of this before, Anne, could you give us a little, just as best as you can, short overview of what these bills are saying?
Well, Diane's probably studied them better than me, but I will. They have a great attorney, Deb Stevenson, who really, chomps right through these bills. And I actually coordinate with them a lot to understand and get a better understanding of the impact to the families in Connecticut, in particular those that want to do something other than public government school. So for any of those families, this will impact them, both SB6 and the 5468. I think both of them will have DCF connections with regard to requiring the school, the Department of Education to, they say notify, I say report anyone who withdraws their child from public school. That's number one. And it's unprecedented that anybody would be reported to DCF when they've done absolutely nothing wrong. I've likened it to you're driving down Main Street, you stop at the stop sign, you wait your 3 to 5 seconds, you move forward, and you drive down the Main Street doing the speed limit. And then a police pulls you over and says, oh, I need to report you to the police barracks. And then you say, why? What did I do? He goes, oh, nothing. I just need to report you because you just drove down Main Street, which isn't illegal. They didn't do anything wrong. And that's really, in simple terms, what this bill's doing. Section 5 of SB6, that's what that does. And then we have 5468, which expands on that. It does that and a lot more. It has ramifications of requiring parents to report to the public school every fall, and then thereafter to continue to report portfolios of what they're doing, and it goes on and on and on. I think Diane might be able to give you maybe some more specifics of that, but in a nutshell, that's what these two bills do.
Thank you for that, Anne. And I'm so glad actually that you use the example of driving down the street, because I've used the example before about how parents, we are required to have our children in a car seat in the car, but we're not pulling over every parent to make sure that they're buckled in correctly. And I think that there would be tremendous outrage if we were pulling over every car in the street. Diane, what are your thoughts about what this encompasses? Anything you'd like to add to what Representative Dauphinais shared?
Well, basically, she covered it with section SB6 is a tax credit bill. And after the initial language came out, section 5 was added, and it basically targets the local or regional boards of education with monitoring the homeschool community. And they would have to notify the Commissioner of Education every single time any child is withdrawn. It doesn't even say that they would have to be withdrawn to homeschool. Every child, every parent would be reported right to the Commissioner of Education, and within 2 days. And then that would further go to DCF, who would check into whether or not that family has any services that they're getting, any connection basically with DCF. And they would get flagged for that. And then ultimately, so that's just section 5 of 6, SB6. Then if you go over to House Bill 5468, it gets much worse. That's a 19-page bill, and fully half of that gets into microscopic detail on how these families that withdraw from public school, private school, parochial school, are all going to be reported to the State Department of Ed, and then they will report to DCF, and DCF will decide whether or not that family can withdraw and complete the withdrawal. And the constitutional violations are, it's a long list of constitutional violations, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. I was speaking to a friend this morning about, her child is in public school, and she was thinking back to a time when her son was having significant physical bullying going on in his school. And she was thinking about homeschooling at that time because she had just had enough, and the school wasn't very helpful in rectifying the situation. And so she had thought about homeschooling, and we were talking this morning. I said, if this bill were to pass, you would have had to wait for permission before you could pull your son out. And that is horrifying, that we would have to wait for somebody to tell us that it's now okay for us to protect our child. It's horrifying. And so this is why I think it's so important for parents in the whole state to understand, not just homeschoolers. If you were to change your mind at any moment, this could affect you and your family. And we know how life's sometimes. You never know when your circumstances are going to change.
Right.
And so one of the things that I wanted to do as well, Anne, if you could just share really quickly the stages that each of these bills are at so that people understand. So I know that SB6 has moved out of committee. Can you tell us about both of the stages we're at?
So SB6 was voted out of the committee. It was all the Democrats who voted for that. The Republicans did not support pushing it out of committee. The next stage is for leadership to make a decision on whether they're going to call it in the assembly, that be it the Senate or the House. So it's a Senate bill. It's SB6, so it's a Senate bill. The Senate would have to call it first. And should it pass out of the Senate, then the House would have to make a decision if they want to call it as well. And so the HB5468 is the opposite. That one is a House bill and would have to be called in the House first, but that has not come out of committee yet. Mm-hmm. The hearing is tomorrow, and then there will be a vote on whether to push that out of committee. Other things that could happen are in the committee meeting, we could amend it. If they accept amendments, they could bring it back to the committee with changes after they have the hearing. So that's possible too. So we don't know what it's going to look like when it comes to committee. And then we don't know, well, we'll talk about putting amendments on it in committee, but typically Democrats never accept and consider Republican amendments friendly. We call them friendly amendments, and they don't accept them. Now, the bill, this is okay. I get confused between vaccine and homeschool, so bear with me because I'm doing both of them are in the same day, which I'll explain that as well. So tomorrow, I call it Wicked Wednesday. There's a lot of wicked bad things going on tomorrow, and that's Wednesday. And they have, I think, strategically planned to put these very big bills all in one day, where even one of those bills would have attracted hundreds, if not thousands of people to come testify. They have three majorly big bills that would do that on their own. That would be a homeschool bill, a medical choice bill, and then the last one would be some gun changes, some law changes to the gun owners. So all of those bills in their own right would draw hundreds of, perhaps thousands of people. We know that when the religious exemption was removed back in 2021, there were over 5,000 people there when the Senate heard that bill on the Senate floor. So these have potential to bring in hundreds of thousands of people. So the day is going to be chaotic. It's going to be confusing. There's going to be a lot of frustration with being able to stand around and see and those sorts of things. And I really think it's intentional. So once bills come out of committee, then they go to the particular assemblies in which they were started, right? If it's a Senate bill, it goes there. And then decisions are made whether to call the bill. Remember, we're in a short session. They know these bills are going to be what we call talkers. They know that I believe every Republican would not support the homeschool bill, the vaccine bill. I don't know about the gun bill. And so what we call them is talkers. So the leadership would have to decide, do we want to use up our time on one particular bill? And they'll make those decisions as we move along, how valuable they are to them. So that's the other thing that's going on.
Right. Okay. So, Diane, what are the points that you are hearing from homeschool families that are the most outrageous to them regarding HB5468?
Well, there's the initial shock at being an innocent person and being treated like you're under suspicion. And for anybody to be able to withdraw a child, and seemingly no thought has been put into this, because they could, perhaps the husband gets transferred out of state or even out of town, or it's a military family and they get orders to move to another base, in 30 days or 60 days. They're going to get reported. Or if a family decides, there's this private school in town and we think that might be a better fit for our child, you're going to get reported. You're going to homeschool, you're going to get reported. It's wild. And what's particularly wild about it is any family that has a child in school that's going to withdraw to homeschool, or for any other reason, but let's say to homeschool, and the school has concern about that child's safety, there is nothing whatsoever to stop them from making a report to DCF, because that's reasonable suspicion. So all of this other stuff is beyond the pale. It is just unacceptable. And there's that aspect of it just at the outset. And then there's the indignancy of when you go further into 5468 and how they're talking about end of year portfolio review and assessments or testing. They, respectfully do not know what they're talking about. They speak public school. We speak homeschool. So imagine the two different languages at a portfolio review. When we have over 100 curricula to choose from, they don't know these things. The first thing that we do when we have new homeschoolers coming on board that are trying to figure out what direction to go in to start their homeschooling, we say, okay, there are these quizzes online. They're free. It will take you less than 5 minutes. Just answer these questions. It automatically will narrow down a match between your answers and the type of curricula there are, because there are so many. Mm-hmm. So maybe you fit into the mold for a literature-based curriculum or unit studies, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we help them to narrow it down. How in the world would you go to a portfolio review and explain any of this to people that don't speak the language? And another point I would like to make is this. In the schools, because I am a trained education advocate, you go to PPT meetings, and one of the biggest areas of focus is least restrictive environment for a child. So if you have a homeschooled child, that the family now has all these laws imposed on them, or they're checking curriculum or approving it and really restricting the family, that is not a least restrictive environment, even for that homeschooled child, especially when you start getting into special needs. The families that are teaching those children because they're doing better in that quieter, structured environment rather than the chaos of the school, it's too much for them. It's just, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just too much for them. So how do you start trying to talk to a public school person when you're speaking a very different language of how you homeschool a special needs child? There are many different techniques that are used with them that the school has zero access to, but they might have a negative opinion about because they don't understand it.
Right. A couple of points to what you said. So everybody in our house submitted written testimony, and there are currently 2, possibly 3, that will be signing up to speak for spoken testimony tomorrow. One of my daughters wrote in her written testimony, we actually live behind a middle school, and my daughter is constantly, she's someone that needs a quiet space. to work. She needs to be able to have that protection around her. And there will be times when when the kids, I mean, look, they're going to play and they're going to get rowdy when they come outside, but she's like, Mom, this is too much. I wouldn't be able to handle this. And so she was talking about that in her testimony, that even living behind a school is too much for her to handle that kind of thing, she needs to be able to have her space. One of the I suppose the supporters of these proposals say that increased oversight protects the children. How do you do homeschool families respond to that argument from either one of you?
Well, when we look, and Anne can also speak to this too, she's witnessed it. If you go all the way back to Adam Lanza, Matthew Tirado, the Waterbury incident, and the New Britain incident, none of them were homeschooled. None of them. With the latest incident with the little girl, Mimi, the mother went at the last minute, the first day of school, after a summer of who knows what. We actually, factually do not know that she wasn't already gone. Mother goes to school, does a notice of intent. Actually, she did it through emails and she did it online. So still nobody saw anybody. So she did it online. And you could say, okay, she withdrew from school to homeschool. Well, she filled out a form online to withdraw the child, but the child may very well have already been gone. So what good did the notice of intent or letter of withdrawal do for her? Nothing. It guarantees nothing. And having us appear as homeschoolers in person for your first time, file an NOI, do a portfolio review, and then after that, you file online. Well, that guarantees nothing. And other states across the country that have had strict regulation, the highest regulated states, there are not many of them. But if you look at their abuse statistics, this has been studied. It is no different than anywhere else. Even states like Connecticut and many states, most states are light regulation. It's just not going to stop bad people from doing bad things, but you can hamstring a whole bunch of good people.
Anne, do you have any comments about that?
I do. So Diane and I have talked about this extensively, and understand that the Waterbury child and Mimi Torres were in public school for a very long time with a lot of oversight. We had an incident in Branford a couple of years ago where a child got home, I think he was 12, got beaten to death by his father with a bat and died. And that's just one example, right? I'm bringing that up because it was so horrific. Right. But Mimi Torres was in school until June 19th, I think it was. Diane, is that correct? June 19th?
I believe it was June 11th.
June 11th.
Around June 19th that the court gave a known abusive parent custody. I don't know why that happened. And then the judicial website murder date is listed as June 24th. And what I've learned from attorneys is that date is not at all arbitrary. There's actually a significant process that has, and paperwork that has to be completed before a date like that can get published. So if it's not the actual date of death, it is known as the beginning of the end. And that was when she was given custody.
So let's just talk about June 11th to now, what reports are saying are September 19th that she died. And we don't have any facts with any of this. It's all speculation.
Right.
I think the mother said that she passed on September 19th. I think the aunt may have done the same. I don't know, but that's what we hear in the media. So from June 11th to September 19th, which is roughly, give or take, 12 weeks, the child during the summer, which most kids go home for the summer, there's no oversight. We don't have little DCF police knocking at your door and saying, oh, can you bring your child so I can check them out? So basically the child was starved to death over the summer and died right after the summer. And so I would argue too, that to Diane's point, that if the mother followed this new regulation and checked in on August 20, whatever the date was for school to start, the child was well close to probably death by that time, starving, caged up. I'm not sure exactly what happened to her, but my guess is that if she were flagged in the system, right, with all of these children being withdrawn, you're never going to get to them all on day one. It's going to take, we know what administrative things are. They take a few weeks, you catch up. And by the first and second week of September, you're saying, okay, this is the list. This is the people we need to call. We need to check up on them. We need to find. She would have never, ever, by this new regulation, it would not have prevented her death. And again, I would argue that she was in school for many, many months being with oversight in the school. Let's go back to the Waterbury case. That child was in school for, I think, 5 years with oversight, 5 years. And so now you're going to say you need to have oversight over those that are homeschooling or pulling their kids out. Look at all the incidences that have happened in our schools, whether it be bullying, sexual assault. We've had bus drivers that are driving drunk, and there's been bus accidents. We've had the tardiness issue is huge, right? Absenteeism, the failure of the school. Many children can't even read and write. We have been told that there's incidences in class where somebody has an outburst and the whole class has to be removed and the child stays in. My point is that they're trying to suggest that oversight in the school is better than being at home with what they're calling no oversight. I would also argue that most of these children are out and about in the public. People see them every day. And many of the people that are choosing to homeschool are mandated reporters. They're teachers, they're nurses, they're doctors, they're social workers. Many of them have given up their careers to stay home and take care of their children. I would also argue that there is not one homeschooler that I've talked to that thinks it was okay what happened to Mimi, the Waterbury child, Matthew Tirado. None of them think that was okay. And I promise you, if any of them witnessed that or had any idea that was going on, they would have been the first one on the phone reporting them to DCF. And let's add in the fact that Newtown was the big school where there was a gun shooter and took out, 20-something children. So you've got that piece of it. And now they're going to make this law, bell to bell, they're calling it, where children can't have a cell phone. So in the event that something happens in the schools, the children would have no way to even call their parents and say, Mom, I feel threatened. I'm scared. I need you to come get me. Now, if they decide when you submit your paperwork that you want to withdraw your child, they're going to say, oh, no, you need to wait. We need to analyze you first and decide. So now you're going to keep your child in a place that they're unsafe or the parents feel unsafe. Let's also add in all of this curriculum that they're putting in that to many parents is immoral. It's wrong. I spoke out on the books that are in the library. The language that's in these books that is being exposed to our children, our parents were mortified. So we all make decisions for our children, and those are to be respected because it's the father and the mother's authority over their children, not the state. And they are the ones that should decide school. And let me just add in the whole vaccine mandate, okay? So if you're going to be forced to stay in school or forced to go back to school, whatever that case may be, there's that element out of it. When the vaccine bill got passed or the religious exemption got removed, many parents pulled their children out of school because that was not their religious belief. They did not believe that they should vaccinate their children. There's so many pieces of this that are so wrong. Right. We could probably talk for half a day on it, right, Diane?
Yeah, I would like to add a little something to that.
Sure.
Well, let's say a child is withdrawn, law is in place, and the school district within 2 days has to report to the State Department, who has to report to DCF, who has to check everything, and then decide whether or not the parent can move forward with withdrawal. Okay, well, how effective is that going to be when the law currently says that if a child is absent for 4 days, the district is supposed to contact the parents, figure it all out, whatever's going on. And if a child is absent for 10 days, doesn't have to be 10 days in a row, but it can be, then they're automatically considered chronically absent. Well, in Connecticut, we have 97,000 chronically absent students. So if the districts, or let's just say the entire state public school system itself, cannot get that straight, how in the world are they going to get it straight for homeschoolers? They're not. They're not.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And one of our folks out in the audience said a high increase rate of suicide if their parent can't get their kids out fast enough. Like there's so many things with this that could go horribly wrong and not in the direction that I think people think it's going to go. One of the things that really bothers me, and I was telling Diane about this yesterday, went way down a rabbit hole because there are statistics and findings from different organizations that the legislators are leaning into as proof that this new legislation needs to exist. And some of those have come from the OCA, and some of those have come from organizations like CRHE. And I look, here's the thing. I love doing this work. I have spent a lot of my time looking at things that come out, statistics and reports to see, okay, what is it that is being reported to people and how can I go back and tell them the actual truth of what's going on? And so if I could look at the statistics, the things in specifically that I went down with CRHE yesterday, there are so many reports on their website. They're claiming that they have to do with homeschooling. They have nothing to do with homeschooling at all. And so I saw one and I thought to myself, how many of these are there? So I'm not going to tell you how long I sat there going case by case to figure out, okay, if there's one, how many are there? And my blood was boiling by the time that I finished and I decided to give up for the day. And so I know that last night, NHELD, the National Home Education Legal Defense, released some statistical experts from UConn that looked at the Child Advocates Report urging homeschool regulation in Connecticut. Diane, can you talk about that?
I sure can. Let's see. After the May 5th, 2025 hearing, and we listened to what the OC had to say and some people speaking with connections to CRHE and media pieces that they had put out, claims that they had made, looking at the website, we knew it didn't add up. So, long story short, we hired two professional PhD statisticians, experts in their field, to review the OCA's work. And they did review it, and we didn't know, we're not statisticians. We said, could you look at this and tell us, is this valid or not? And let's go from there. And they said, absolutely not. We have a full report from them. We've been sitting on it for months. And last night, NHELD released it and CHN released it. So basically, what it boils down to is they said There is no statistical analysis that could be used to make any inference about the impact of homeschooling on DCF referral rates. It's just not there. The legislators would be foolish to believe the so-called analysis that the state's child advocate, it was originally Sarah Egan, now Christina Gio, carrying the torch, that was published on May 5th, 2025 as her rationale for her outcry to regulate homeschooling in Connecticut. It should not be believed. It is statistically invalid. And these professionals went so far as to say that it cannot be used for any type of regulatory action because the basis is completely unsound. And they go into detail about this. They said the reason that we refer to this, to her report, not as a professional study, not as a statistical analysis, it is nothing more than a descriptive report. And that is a huge difference. And on May 5th, one of the last things I said to the committee was, please be careful about what you're believing as fact without checking it, because you're being duped. And I did not have the time to elaborate, and I did not have the data here with which to elaborate. I just knew based on what we had looked at on our own. But they go into great detail here. And it says, in effect, no legislator should be basing his or her decision to regulate homeschooling on the word of the child advocate and her very flawed report. And we include in this new release the actual report, as well as NHELD's summary of it. And it's very clear. This report can be described as a purely descriptive report, but it lacks key information and is not a statistical analysis. And CRHE functions the same way. They gather data by collecting reports on the media about tragedies. Whatever their sources are, they're gathering information. Gathering information, sure, you can put it on a website. We have a Facebook page titled National Children's Safety Issues, and we do the same thing. There are a whole bunch of parents that are publishing newsworthy reports of horrific child safety issues, but we're not making claims. We're not making any type of statistical analysis claims about the public schools because of it. So that's the difference. Making a report, making observations is one thing, but making claims and inflating data is a very different story.
Right. And how do legislators evaluate sort of these competing concerns when a bill like this creates such strong reactions and obviously now different facts coming in from different sides of the issues? Do you think that, I mean, this is sort of a silly question, I guess, at this point. Do you think that the legislators supporting this bill care to hear about the information that's coming in that doesn't support their bill?
Oh,
I have you muted, Anne. Let me there we go.
Sorry, I just unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So this is my 10th year as a in the legislature, and I shared with you that in 2021 I saw the religious exemption removed, and what I witnessed was horrific. Hundreds of thousands of people showed up to say, please don't do this. Don't make prejudice on our children because we've made certain medical choices for them and it shouldn't be contingent on whether they can go in the public school or not, right? And they basically gave us the backhand. They gave every parent that came in there the backhand. The testimonies were horrific to the events that happened with some children that already been vaccinated. You had to hear it. It was so emotional to hear a mother or a father come in and talk about what they saw after their child got vaccinated. They witnessed it. My child had this reaction, or my child had that reaction, or now they're nonverbal, or whatever that was, but it didn't seem to matter. And that is, to me, just it's beyond belief. They didn't care. Listen, we all have different DNA. We all learn differently. That's the homeschool style, right? We all learn differently. We have different DNA that our bodies are going to react to things differently. We're not all allergic to bees, and we're not all allergic to peanuts, and we're not all audio learners, and we're not all visual learners. We all learn very different ways. So that seems to be disregarded. But in my opinion, this is all about an agenda and control over our kids. We know that there's many parents that pull their kids out because of some of the things they're being taught in school. For example, the transgender community and the schools are very supportive of allowing a child to come in and be called a different name or being referred to as a different pronoun. Now, if your family, your mother and father disagree with that, well, that's just too bad. So they might want to pull their child out for that. So I think it's, in my opinion, this is way bigger. It's about an agenda that the left has. It's about controlling what they learn and making sure that they are, what do I want to call it? Filled with this stuff that you may agree or disagree with, but it should be the parent's decision on those sorts of things. One thing we didn't talk about, and I'm going to mention if it's okay, is the funding. Okay. I've been digging into this. I don't think Diane and I have even had this conversation, but so right now, whether there's a lot of people out there that don't even know this, a lot of legislators don't even understand this. When a child goes to another school, whether it be a technical school or a magnet school or a charter school, the school that they left funded that child to be there. When they leave and go to another school, the school they're going to gets funding, and the school that they were in gets funding. We call it double funding. It's a kind of a funny term. It's called double funding. So in essence, the taxpayers are paying double for that child in the public school because they were in the public school, and now they're funding like another semi-public, if you want to call it, magnet, charter, technical school, right? So the funding is there. Now we're going to start keeping this list of all these homeschoolers. And it's my prediction that if this bill passes, that they are going to be considered in that public school funding. And their excuse is that, well, if the child comes back, we need to make sure that the school's staffed. We have the classrooms are big enough. The school can handle them, right? So the double funding is a huge concern for me, and where this is going to take that to another level. And then now they've even proposed that students can be part-time homeschooled. What does that even mean? What does that even look like? It's insanity, right? I don't even know what that looks like. But from a funding perspective, it's going to go amok. I promise you that the cost of education, if this bill should pass, is going to explode. And then Diane hasn't even mentioned the schools and superintendents and people that are already very concerned about being able to handle this mandate. How they're going to have to hire staffing because they're already saying they don't have enough teachers, enough staff. DCF is saying they don't have enough staff. They can't handle that. They can't handle what they're doing. And now you're going to add all this. It doesn't even make any sense. I don't know. Diane, you probably have more to add to that, but we hadn't even talked about those things yet.
Yeah, Debbie and I have been talking about it. First of all, I think the overwhelming majority of homeschool parents don't want anything to do with that. There's just, it's not good for a lot of reasons. It's really not ideal for the schools either, and the superintendents are speaking about it. it just causes them a lot of problems. We'll see where it goes, but the other side of it is, the parents, homeschool parents, need to understand when you enroll a child in school, it's a Latin term called in loco parentis that comes into play. You are forfeiting, whether you know it or not, it's your responsibility to know it, but you are forfeiting some of your parental rights. And the school is acting in loco parentis. They are the parent while your child is there. So when they're enrolled, that in loco parentis can expand into your home. This is what we saw during COVID with the distance learning. And children would be on the computers doing their classes for distance learning. And across the country, we saw incidents of families being reported to Child Protective Services because the teacher saw something in the background that they didn't think was good. It's just like ridiculous. But that is the in loco parentis in action. They start having rights into your life. So, if it's a parent that says, "Oh, cool, I want to sign my kid up for a few classes," and they want to avail themselves of that, well, good for them. But most of us know better, and we don't want anything to do with it. That doesn't even get into the transportation issues, the liability issues, the kids on a sports team. Well, then what happens if the child gets hurt? What happens if the child is exposed to drugs and alcohol, which is a problem on a number of sports teams? There's just so many unanswered questions about liability in many different directions.
Yeah. I'm seeing some comments coming in about this. What about children being allowed to attend any district open school choice? Who funds transportation for part-time hybrid homeschool? Who would provide transport for the part-timers? Look, guys, this seems pretty obvious to me. And so one of the other things that somebody was commenting on is I hope all parents, realize this bill affects any future doors of choice to transfer their child. When some people hear the bill and see homeschooling, they feel like, okay, this doesn't apply to me. And that's one of the things that I've been trying really hard. I have a lot of friends whose children are in public school, and that's what they chose as the best need for their children. And I don't judge them. They don't judge me. We're happy friend family over here. But we've had to have that conversation of, do you understand what's gonna happen if things change for you? And one of the other things that I wanted to make sure that we talk about is the fact that this bill is called an act concerning equivalent instruction. And this idea of equivalent instruction is really interesting, being that every school district I know of in the state of Connecticut has very different results. Very different things that they have going on within the schools. And so there are the people, though, that are saying, how can we make sure that all children are receiving the education and support that they need and deserve? Diane, do you have a response to that?
Oh, yeah.
I knew you would.
Equivalent instruction. Okay, so what is that? There's 169 towns and however many districts in the state, right? So each one of the boards of education decides what they're going to use for all their subjects, whether it's Houghton Mifflin or Harcourt, Preston, Prentice Hall, all these different curriculums, curricula options. They make these decisions. All right, our district's going to use this for math, this for science, et cetera, et cetera. Fine. And from district to district, it's different, because each district gets to choose for their own children, their students, and the boards of education make that decision. So again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. How in the world can they have anything whatsoever to say about all of our choices? And we have all these different curricula to choose from, including theirs. because you can go on Amazon or different places and you can purchase. I used to purchase, I don't remember the title of it. It's, one of those mainstream titles that they use in the public schools for an art curriculum. I just thought they had the best textbook for art. So I got them all, and that's what my kids had for art. Well, you can't compare apples to oranges to bananas and plums. You can't do it. Every district is different. Every homeschool is different, just like the districts are different. Every homeschool does something a little different. Well, I use Oak Meadow. My kids grew up on Oak Meadow with whatever other supplements and other things we added to it through the years. And Ann's family could use something else. Your family could use something else, and every other homeschooler. Some of them, there could be, X number of homeschoolers in Connecticut that use Oak Meadow. How many use Abeka, or they're doing classical conversations? It's that, to me, is the equivalent instruction to what you choose among the choices available to you. It is not, nor should it ever be, that the homeschooler has to now use what's approved at the state level, because it can't be at the district level. They're all different. So where's it going to come from? Do you have to use what's in the district? Do I have to use what they use in my town? Which I'm not going to do. I'm talking grandchildren now, but no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and not even to mention in houses like ours, I've homeschooled 6 children. And so all of my children have used different curriculum because I choose curriculum based on what the child needs, not, well, this is what we're going to choose as a family. This is not a public school in my house. So I choose different based on what they need. And then sometimes I was thinking about this too. We've had situations where we've gotten a couple months into, our year, and we've had to make the decision that the child is not ready to learn that information, and maybe we need to put it on hold for a little while. Maybe we need to wait and come back to it, or find something else for them to learn. And so I have a really hard time believing that they're going to be able to understand what each individual child's needs are. Anne?
Oh. I got to start, and I wanted to say it for Diane. I want to say equivalent to what? Equivalent to what? Are failing schools? That equivalent to third graders can't read and write? Equivalent to the number of children that aren't even graduating? I don't. Equivalent to what? That you only engage in any kind of learning, like you can miss. I don't know. The absentee rate is very high. 2 days a week you can go to school, and the rest you don't. And I'm not really being critical of that, in a way that homeschoolers do things very eclectically. Some days they go on a field trip. Some days they go grocery shopping and do household things, and they do different things. So I'm not suggesting they must do academics a certain amount of days, but my point is equivalent to what? That's my big question. Equivalent to what? The oversight you have in schools where children have died, where children have been sexually assaulted and bullied? Is that what we're talking about equivalent? Well, if that's the equivalent education you're requiring me to do, God forbid that we participate in that. I wanted to add something else too about the families that homeschool. And I know Diane tells me this, and we talk about this all the time. There are so many professionals out there that decide to homeschool that have given up their career or put it on hold to homeschool. So they're a one person income. The other one has decided to stay home and do the homeschooling. Many of them are probably a one-car family. So now you're going to put this burden on them to get there at the beginning of the school year and show up and show some kind of portfolio or whatever you want to call it. What are they going to do? Uber them? Are they going to have a bus go pick them up? I mean, it's beyond absurd, this whole bill. And I'm trying not to miss anything, because I'm making lists as we're talking, and it gets longer and longer and longer. And heck, I would argue that we need to have the little DCF police going during the summer and watching us, because you won't have any eyes on them all summer. I honestly, if this bill passes, that's what we should do, because that's what they're saying. They need oversight.
Right.
They need to be seen. Some mandated reporters need to have their eyes on them.
Yeah. Like,
I don't know. Are you suggesting that if you show up the first day of school that you can't then go home and starve your child from August 24th? You wouldn't make it till Christmas. So you think once a year you come in and you check in? Maybe we should have monthly check-ins. Maybe we should have bi-weekly check-ins, because you could starve somebody in 4 weeks. That probably isn't adequate. I would argue that this bill is really a poorly written bill to achieve what they're trying to achieve and have oversight over children.
It really would come down to the point where they're and that bill is heading in that direction. It crosses a line into surveillance. And yet it makes no sense, because if they're claiming, like you said, that they're concerned about the safety of children, then what are they doing? Sure, all summer long for every child in the state of Connecticut. And what are they doing for all of the children that are ages birth to 5 years old when 80% of the abuse happens? It makes no sense. It's about control. And I will say this, in the FOIA documents, one of the things that we found were emails back and forth between some people discussing their PSIS, Public School Information System, Computer Data Tracking System. I believe that has now been renamed to Data Link CT. And they were talking about wanting to get our kids into that system. And they can track anything and everything, anything that they can find with that number in the public domain. And so what could go wrong with that? Well, if you research the topic, and I have, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, the thing that happens is, let's just say you have a child in high school and they're naughty. They get themselves into maybe a little bit of legal trouble. That's all documented under their ID number. Now you move forward and, they grow up, they mature, and they're not acting like that anymore. And they are like, oh, I want to go to college. Oh, I want to get a job, or I want to do both. Well, guess what? That information is available to prospective employers, to colleges where you're applying. And there are articles written. There's this one particular boy that I remember, and that's why I'm mentioning this particular scenario. He was naughty in high school, turned himself around and matured and was ready to move on in a more adult capacity, being responsible. And he was having trouble. He wasn't getting accepted into a college, and he wasn't getting a job so repeatedly that eventually he realized, whoa, wait a minute. So that's what the article is all about. I don't know what his outcome was, because it didn't get into that. It got into the perhaps unintended consequences of this, which is really serious. And I see 5468 as a bill that is loaded with perhaps unintended consequences. It depends, I suppose, on how quickly they're looking to grasp for the control that they shouldn't need or want, because there is absolutely no data supporting it. And saying that they are the self-assigned authority to have eyes on a child to keep them safe or to make sure that they're being educated doesn't hold water for a split second when you look at the facts in the public schools. The data that most recently came out from Psychology Today says that K through 12, all children in America have a 19.7% chance of being sexually or physically abused, or both, by the adults in the school districts. The peer-to-peer bullying issues has been, it's in a range, depending on district, from 40% to 70 or 80%. So obviously having eyes on the child doesn't keep them safe at all. And when we have, as Anne already said, Connecticut is one of the top states for quality education, but it has very serious problems with a significant percentage of the students being given a precious high school diploma. And what did they get for it? What did they get for those years being in the school when a significant percentage of them cannot read, write, or do 12th grade work? And they're unprepared. Talk to any college professor. These kids are coming in, they are unprepared at all for even basic level college classes. And I've heard from parents and college students that things are happening, like the professor is sitting there reading the lesson from the book so that it can help the kids who can't read or can't read well enough to be able to look at, we're going to do chapter 1 at the beginning of the semester. They're also doing things like curbing the grades significantly and doing open book tests. Like, I would be concerned about somebody like that designing an airplane.
Yeah. There's so many points to make about the equivalent instruction piece of this, and also really, turning over sort of the authority to the school systems that in many cases have failed our children, and that's why we homeschool. Even before, and I wanted to quickly mention this, when we talk about safety, that's one of the things that even I went to public school, private school, and had a tutor here in the state of Connecticut growing up. And back when I was in school, my brother, who came to pass away in 2010, but when he was in school, he was hit by a teacher. And that teacher, the only thing that they got here in the state of Connecticut was 2 weeks paid leave. That is the only thing that they received for slapping my brother in the middle of a school day. So is this who we're supposed to trust with the safety of our children?
Yeah.
So I'd like to jump in on that. Representative Foster came in and testified, I think it was in education, with regard to a particular constituent she had with a child in school. And this child was abused in school. Mm. And she went through the step-by-step what she was trying to do to help the parent with no results, calling the school, waiting an hour. The child came home abused. Did you hear that, Diane? Did you hear about Foster's testimony?
I heard that testimony, and I believe that was when we were discussing.
She's really a perfect example.
We were discussing Section 5.
She's really a perfect.
She's
a perfect example of. What's that?
Oh, I was saying.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
She was speaking on Children's Committee for Section 5 of SB6 when she said that.
Right.
It was then?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember because I'm in 3 different committees with all kinds of stuff going on. But she gave a horrific testimony of this child, and it was a constituent of hers child that was abused in school, and how long it took to get through to anybody. And she's a legislator, and the length she went to get somebody to respond and give her assistance with this situation. And she was testifying on that, and the child was in public school. It was a perfect example of why a parent might not want their kids in public school. You may or may not, but they're literally gonna tell you you either can or can't. You're on hold. And these are without even substantiated cases now. I know that there are people who think children shouldn't be homeschooled. And they might see their neighbors' kids who are homeschooled. One might say, you know what, I'm gonna run outside barefoot in the snow. I want to see how it feels. And they go running out in the yard barefoot, and they're going yee-haw, yee-haw, and yelling. And what do you know? The parent next door or the person says, calls DCF, and all of a sudden you're on a list because your children during the school day are running around with no shoes on and a t-shirt and shorts, and they were screaming, and they're reporting some kind of abuse situation. Now, they would be in the bucket of an open case, according to what this bill says. Anybody with an open case, not substantiated. Nobody came in and said, oh yeah, this family's abusing their kid. Parents never had a chance to respond, but the kid is now in an open case, hasn't been settled. And so they're sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for the school, the Board of Ed to approve, DCF to approve that they're allowed to pick another alternative choice to education.
Right, right. And there's a lot of people who honestly don't know what it is like to be falsely reported and have a caseworker come to your house and harass you for months. There's a lot of people who don't understand that. That is included in my written testimony. It will be spoken about during my verbal testimony tomorrow as well. And it is a situation where I've had to sit here and say, what's going to happen when we go to this check-in yearly? And even though our case was unsubstantiated, what's going to happen when my name pops up?
Right. Well, and
ahead.
nothing for nothing, Jessica, but they're saying they're not going to keep the list. That's what they've added in the section in SB6. Wow. Do you know how many people trust the government and trust that their name will not be held in a list in the cloud somewhere? And I'm going to tell you, as a government official, don't trust the government.
Appreciate
that.
Don't
trust the government. I would never take their word for it. Look, we trust them to follow the process, right? And they're not even doing that. We had a couple of weeks ago, we had session day where they broke every rule under the sun. Bills were heard that have never gotten a hearing, never had an opportunity for the public to come weigh in on, and we pushed them through as an emergency. They weren't emergencies, and now we're not following the process because people are supposed to have the opportunity to be heard, and they're putting in, submitting that they want to be heard, and we're told that they're going to be cut off in 24 hours. Too bad, so sad. No more. None of you are going to be heard. They're doing that in the Public Health Committee as well. So let's talk about the process. So you want these same people that are supposed to follow this process to believe you that you're going to remove their name? I don't think so.
Right. And I've said the same. I had an interaction with a couple, a representative and a senator. I will leave that be for now. You can go check out my other articles. And I said to them, I don't believe you. I don't believe you, because my experience has been that I was very naive before I believed everything that was heard and was told to me. And that's how you find out, my friends. That's how you find out. So listen, we're past an hour, and I really want to value both of your time today. But sort of for the end of this, what I want to do is give sort of that last plea to everybody that's watching. You still have a little less than 2 hours left to register to testify, to speak tomorrow, but you can also continue to put in those written testimonies. We'll start with Anne. Anne, do you want to give kind of that final plea here?
Please, 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 please submit your name for testimony. I said any student who's a high schooler, it would be a great experience. Submit their name, submit your name, submit your husband's name. If at the last minute you can't make it, you didn't feel like you were up to it, or for whatever reason, okay, so you won't be heard and they'll move on to the next one. But we want to show them that there are hundreds of people willing to come in or testify remotely to say, we don't want this bill. Please, please, please put your name on the list. You don't even have to have your written testimony ready to submit your name. You can submit your name before 3 o'clock, and then you can work on your written testimony later on and get that all refined. Or you can simply say, I don't want this bill. Please don't pass this bill. You don't have to say any more than that. Put your name in. Saying I don't support this bill, it doesn't even give you long enough time to get nervous about saying that. So please, 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 I'm imploring that all of you please submit your name for testimony, for oral testimony.
Thank you, Anne. Diane?
I echo the same thing. I've been through this process so many times over the decades where, they raise this bill, they raise that bill. And they have listened. They have listened. It ideally should be a bipartisan issue because we're talking about all of our children and what is the best thing to do and how to do that. And you have to express your voice. So far, there are at least several thousand written testimonies that are already uploaded on the CGA website for this bill, and 99.9% of them are opposed to it. That includes the State Department of Education, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, many superintendents, and many people from the public that are looking at this whole thing and are stunned. They need to. Well, one of the Republicans, I don't remember his name, for SB6 asked for an amendment to have a study group, like a true study group where people came to the table and listened to each other. Not because you were sitting there talking about, well, let's figure out how we can regulate. No. Hear each other. They do not speak homeschool, but they need to. And regulating us when they cannot even speak homeschool is an injustice to every homeschooled child in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Diane. I will also just give the reminder that you do not need to be a homeschooler to sign up to testify or to testify to submit a written testimony. I have had friends that have submitted testimony this morning in opposition who were teachers. A friend of mine was a special education teacher, and she saw things, she witnessed things that made her know that education choice is important. I have another friend who submitted testimonies whose child goes to public school that just knows she wants to still have that choice if it ever came down to it. And she knows of the impact this is going to have on her taxes and other things that are coming up. And so this is an every parent, every educator issue, and we would love to see everybody come out in support of opposition of it. Let's see, we got a couple comments I want to address really quickly before we close up. Even a Republican representative told my friend at his continent that IEP children can receive services in homeschool. They do not understand homeschool laws. So the ones that are making the laws, guys, are not even understanding what it is that we have and don't have in this state already. Jacqueline is testifying and looking at the full video. Thank you so much for watching today. We appreciate you. Chris said that they're trying to put the kiddo into school to get more money, that they may be missing the unseen reverse consequence of this bill, where some public school parents dealing with their kids who hate school now, with this bill, they will now have a way to only go to school for 2 classes. It will make an administrative mess. Why aren't we having the slippery slope that Anne was talking about? Why aren't we having DCF investigate stay-at-home parents? New moms are unfit to care for their newborns. These are some of the things that can spiral down if we don't come together and speak against this now. Anything else that either one of you would like to say before we close today?
Go sign up.
I would just add, go sign up. And I think, Jessica, to your point, you don't have to be a homeschooler or someone who has your child in private school. If you're a taxpayer in Connecticut, I promise you, if this bill passes, we are going to have an explosion of taxes to support our public schools. it's going to be insane. And DCF staffing, it's going to explode.
Yeah. And we don't already have tax issues in Connecticut, do we, everyone? Do we want more is the question. And so it's a good point to make. I will be at the Capitol with my family tomorrow, my husband and some of my children. Probably not my adult children, but they did attend, or they did submit testimony in written form. But I will also be there to take some stories from any of my fellow families who would like to share their stories on my network. I'm more than happy to hear your story. You can come and find me. I will have a gray shirt on that says, I do not co-parent with the government. So you'll be able to find me with that shirt on and my kids in tow as well. So I want to thank you, Diane Connors and Representative Ann Dauphinais, for joining us today and helping shed light on this complex issue that is clearly important to many families across Connecticut. Conversations like this remind us that democracy is not something that happens far away from our everyday lives. It happens when people stay informed, when they participate respectfully, and when communities engage thoughtfully with the decisions that shape their future. Whether someone agrees or disagrees with a particular policy proposal, the most important thing is that people take the time to understand the issues, listen to different perspectives, and engage in the process in a constructive way. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today for this special edition of the Breakthrough Show. Thank you again, Diane and Ann. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.